Welcome to Biz Bites, brought to you by Com Together, helping businesses like yours build their brand through telling amazing stories to engage and grow audiences on multiple platforms. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites. And as usual with my guests, I like them to get them to introduce themselves. And I have someone that I've got to know a little bit in recent times, and he's definitely got some interesting things to talk about. So, Roy, without further ado, I'd love you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Anthony, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. Looking forward to spending some time with you and the people listening to the podcast. My name's Roy West. I have been in business now, run my own businesses and been in business for over 40 years. Looking forward to the other end very soon, maybe in the next 5 or so years. Look, I've had an interesting and varied background. I did a marketing degree back before they were very popular, and went on and worked in the wine industry for about 10 years, which was the wine industry in the mid-'80s, early 90s was a wonderful place to be. Not great for your health, but it was fantastic lifestyle. It was just good times. And then I moved on and did some other things, worked for some corporates, and realised fairly soon that wasn't going to be me. Couldn't really handle the whole political agendas that most people took to work. So went out in the mid-'90s, 1994. I bought a business for sale book because that was the only way you could do it back then. There was no internet, so you had to look at these. They were big and thick business to sales books, and they were full of dreams. And I searched that for a number of times. Almost bought a sports store in Rockhampton. Glad I didn't. And then I came across a travel business in the Whitsundays. And 2 days later, I was in the travel business in the Whitsundays, and a day later, I owned the business. And then I had to go home and tell all my friends that I was moving from Sydney, where I grew up to Ellie Beach. And Ellie Beach, that was the Wild West back then. That was 1994, as I said, and it was very much the Wild West. Things were a lot different than they are now. There wasn't a lot of regulation and paperwork, and we just got on with it. And we cut a long story short, we ran a sailing business. We took people out for trips through the Whitsunday Islands. We started with one boat and a crew of 3 and me in the office. Today we have 8 boats, 40 people on the water, 10 people in the office. It's been a ride. It's about to come to an end. My partner in that business is well into his 70s now. I'm about to turn 60, and we've decided that that's enough. I came and went through that business over a number of years, and in the early 2000s, 2004, I met a bloke who was a business coach. And in 2004, I'd never met a business coach. I didn't quite understand what that was or why you would have one. And anyway, he was buying a boat from me at the time, and we became pretty good friends. And a year later, he talked me into becoming a business coach. So I did that, and I did that I joined the Action franchise, which was the really only way you could do business coaching back then. And I think at the time they had 1,000 coaches in the program. And we grew a business in Sydney to a point where we had 19 coaches in the team. And I general managed that for a couple of years. And that was very interesting times. It was interesting from the point of view that there was a lot of people getting involved in coaching. And for the first time, you could see businesses really growing under some good coaching programs. And you saw a lot of people coming to coaching who had no idea. Just because they'd been an accountant meant that they could coach a business. Didn't really work that way. I did that for a long time, specialised in working with lawyers for about the last 12 years. And then came back to the sailing business 5 years ago when we had to not so nicely dump our managing director. And, it was really Roy to the rescue. And I had to come in and solve a problem. We had some significant cash flow problems and other issues in the business. And then COVID hit, and we all know what that was like. But tourism was very much the pointy end of that sword. And we took the full brunt we took the full brunt of running a very successful business, and 2 weeks later it was shut. So that caused some absolute dilemma in my life. I won't lie. I ended up in hospital with blood pressure around the 212 mark. If you know anything about blood pressure, that's not good.
No.
And I thought my whole world was crumbling, and I thought in my late 50s I'd end up, having to sell my house because it was tied to the loans in the business, and we'd end up with nothing. So that was pretty horrendous. And I sat there 5 days in a ward for people that had strokes and heart attacks and things like that. It was not a very nice place. And for 5 days I sat there and I went, there's got to be a better way to this. So I actually am now, in the next 2 months, launching a business called Rethink Your Business. And Rethink, I hope, will show people that there is a much easier and better way to run their business than they do today. So that's me in a nutshell. It's been a career. It's been interesting, but that's where we're up to now.
Quite a journey, and so much to pick up on there from doing that. And I love the fact that you've gone from wine to boats to business coaching, but there's been a lot happen in between. And I guess I want to take back to the beginning, because obviously if you studied marketing and things, you had a particular direction. But was there an idea early on in the piece and where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do?
My grandfather was a very successful business owner, and from a very early age, when I was 8 years of age, he owned a department store in the country. I lived in the city. We went out to that department store, and I mean, you imagine walking in and your grandfather owns all of this. And I sat there at 8 years of age looking at the toy department, and he came up, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "You look for a week and you can pick something out at the end." And it was really exciting for me. I was quite chuffed by that. I've never forgotten it. I think I broke the toy within about 2 weeks, but it's still, it meant a lot to me at the time. So I always knew, probably from a very early age, that I wanted to work for myself. That was never really in doubt. But I think the coaching thing came more was a more natural fit for me long term, even though I've come back to run this business for 5 years. But it's much more, I'd much rather do that. But yeah, I knew early on I wanted to work for myself. By the time I was 14, 15, I knew I was going to work for myself.
It's amazing how that is inbred in us. I've shared before, but my both my grandparents and my father were particular influences in that, because my father ran his own business as a pharmacist. But my grandparents, who came to Australia with nothing, ended up opening a clothing factory, and which was very successful until they retired. And, I had similar experiences where I'd walk into a factory and think, wow, they own all of this. Lots of people being employed to make clothes. Probably a little bit different. And then I didn't have to worry about the toys off the shelf. They were shoving clothes on myself and my sister, more my sister than me. I think most of their clothes were more for girls. They did do a few boys things. And, so we benefited from that, but it was quite amazing to have that. And I guess that entrepreneurial spirit is very hard to get out of the system when that's what you grow up seeing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And having spent a little bit of time, I mean, I worked for a year for Telstra. There were 83,000 people worked there at the time. And my job was to disseminate information to other parts of Telstra. And I remember ringing up and saying, we launched the 13 number range that's still popular today. We actually launched that, and to ring other, like the engineering department, and just be told, no, that's not going to happen. I just couldn't understand how a business could work that way. So it just drove me nuts.
It is very hard, isn't it, when you're got that mindset of wanting to be in charge and not understanding when you get a no, and rather looking for solutions. But when you're caught in the bureaucracy, for want of a better term, of management, it can be really difficult process.
I think it was even worse than that. I think it was just, and you see it very much in even small businesses today, just people unwilling to change. And that's what drives me nuts. I mean, we turned this business upside down, our sailing business upside down, in order to put it back together to work. And some people left, and that was perfectly okay. But the ones that have stayed have had, they thank me now for what they've actually learnt in the last 5 years that they had no clue of before that. So, yeah, it's in the blood, and when it's in the blood, it's in the blood.
Yeah. So when you went to university and you're studying marketing, what was the plan after that? Because particularly in those days, and I remember I'm a little bit further behind you, but not too many years. And I know that marketing was not certainly was not a course to going out in a business on your own in those days.
Yeah, well, I was lucky. Well, you remember the Sliding Doors movie of the early 1990s?
I do, very
I
well.
had one of those moments when I was 16. Family moved in next door to us, and the bloke owned a wine business. His name was Peter Bourne. They call him the Wine Man. You can look him up. He writes for Gourmet Traveller and all these things still now. Does a lot of courses and corporate sort of gigs. Peter Bourne had a bottle shop in Surrey Hills, not far from your world, and I was from Roseville up on the North Shore, and so I got a job working for Peter when I was 18, driving, deliveries around town. And so I fell into the wine industry that way. And he used to have this massive room, tasting room, where we'd have 20 people for lunch on a Saturday, and I'd be working on Saturdays. And we had the most influential people in the wine industry come for lunch. And as a young 18-year-old, I would just sit there and listen to them. And osmosis took over, and I learnt a little bit. And so by the time I graduated university, the next week I looked in the newspaper, because that again was the option in those days.
Yep.
And there was an ad for a marketing graduate in the wine business. I walked in, and 15 minutes later, the guy knew I knew more about the industry than he did, and I knew more people in the industry than he did. He gave me the job. So
fantastic.
I fell into it, I would say, but I've been in and around the wine industry a lot over the years, and it's a great industry.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And there's a lot of there's a real variation, isn't there, in that industry, because there are the big brand names that we all know, yes, but there's a lot of really small businesses out there that are that work pretty damn hard to get out there, and I guess they're not necessarily looking to compete always with the big brands, but they're certainly having to do a lot of the hard work.
Yeah, well, they definitely are. And look, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of very, very good winemakers over the years. And the very good ones, they just look you in the eye and say, mate, I'm a farmer. I just happen to grow grapes instead of cotton or cattle or whatever else. And I was fortunate to get involved with a brand called Curly Flat many years ago. And if you don't know Curly Flat, it's just north of Melbourne, and make brilliant wine. And I got to become their New South Wales representative for a while. And they were a fledgling little business. They had a little bit of money behind them, but the quality of their product was sensational. And it was just wonderful to work with somebody who was so meticulous about what they did. And that really resonated with me. And they're quite a well-known, established brand today. But yeah, I was lucky enough to see that from the beginning. So it was good fun. Yeah, it was always good fun. There was plenty of lessons to be learned, and it was always interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those industries, isn't it, where the people that are running those and owning those businesses on a day-to-day basis, they're not doing it just because it's just another business. You've got to be passionate about something like that, because it's really full on.
Tourism's the same. Obviously I've spent a lot of time in that one as well. And people go, oh, that must be fun. Yeah, 7 days a week. And I'm not joking, it is 7 days a week. And when people don't turn up, you get the phone calls at 6 or 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday. Sorry, I'm sick. Yeah. Or what time did you get out of the nightclub? No, I'm sick. And so, look, all small businesses, I don't care what small business, what industry you're in, you're putting the hours in because you want to do it. And I think it shows up real quick if you don't want to do it. And then that's time not to do it.
Yeah. So talk to me, because I want to get into those things that you've changed, that you're changing now. But talk to me about the jump from wine into boats.
Well, it was kind of a weird thing when I was working in the wine industry. One of the family, because most of the in the 1980s, the wine industry were big families. I
Yep.
mean, the Oatleys, who obviously own Hamilton Island now, were just a family winemaker back then. But I worked for a company called McWilliams, which was a family, Mount Pleasant in Hunter Valley, and other brands that they own. And it was just a family business. And one of the kids in the family wanted to do a course, and because I was the recent graduate, I got lumped with the task of doing the homework for her. And one of the courses was a travel and tourism course, and I read the what do you call it?
Well,
The course,
the course, the notes about it. Yep.
Yeah, and I went, "Oh, this is interesting." So I signed up myself, just purely out of interest. I always loved traveling. My father was a sea captain, and I always loved traveling. So I did the course without any real commitment to actually wanting to get involved. I just enjoyed the course, and then about a year later, when I did decide to leave and look for my first real opportunity, then again, it just fell in my lap. I literally opened this Business for Sales book magazine at the page, read the ad, and went, "I'm going to buy that."
It's amazing.
Someone wrote a good ad.
Do you still have it?
No, I don't still. Someone wrote a good ad. So there you go.
They got you in. Look, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you've obviously moved around a little bit over a period of time. And I find it fascinating because you've had your influence of your grandfather, but you've had your influence, obviously, of your dad being a sea captain as well. You've gone and found this, but it's one thing to open another business or to buy a business and to do that, but to do it where you're making such a significant move, because you've gone from Metro Sydney area. Obviously, you're in the Hunter Valley and those kinds of areas as well, which is it's still, it's not completely remote. It's easy driving distance to city areas, to finding yourself on the Whitsundays. That is a big move.
Well, it was a big move in the mid-90s because, like I said, it was the Wild West. We didn't have traffic lights. There was only a few thousand people here, and you went to Coles, which were the only grocery here, and you went committed to a recipe that you'd decided on that afternoon, only to find half the things weren't there. It's it was very remote, but I mean, it's a stunningly beautiful place. And you get out on the islands, and it's just one of the great places of the world. And so it was never boring to be here. I mean, I started 3 businesses the first time I was here. I was importing yachts from America and started a bareboat businesses where people hire their own boat. We did lots of fun and adventures. I started a movie theater which crashed badly, and we had some wonderful times. But the remoteness never really hit me. It was never really a factor. People wanted to come and visit me, which was good. Well, that novelty lasted about a year or so, but it was good the first time. But it's more now I notice it. We're an hour and a half to the nearest hospital. We're an hour and a half, from any form of civilization, and that's in Mackay. And, really, you have to get on a plane to do anything. And COVID really shut us in. And, I know everyone was isolated during COVID, but we felt very isolated during COVID.
I was going to say you would do, because without dwelling on it too long, but how did that work for you in terms of, the basics of groceries and all of that sort of thing, which, it's easy when you're in the city because, you can get anyone to deliver to you within reason.
Yeah, it didn't seem to be that big an issue. People are still delivering to us out of Queensland. We have Bowen just north of us, which has, which is basically the fruit capital of Queensland. We had access to plenty of fruit, and there's plenty of fish in the ocean.
Yes. Well, I suppose that's the flip side, isn't it? There's a lot of people, and I know a lot of people, particularly in Melbourne, who really struggled with the lockdowns, and that was quite limiting because a lot of people live in relatively small accommodation, and you weren't allowed to go particularly far at all. Whereas at least I suppose you've got the I don't know, were you allowed to get on the ocean and
you're allowed to do it. I mean, we weren't monitored like that. There was no, you must be 200 meters from your house at all times with only 2 people. As far as the actual virus was concerned, it didn't impact us at all.
Yep.
It was just that they took away 99.9% of our client base. That was a factor.
Yeah.
But the actual virus wasn't a factor. We didn't even have it here until they opened the borders way later in the time.
Yeah, it's well, so talk to me then about going from you had to come back into the business, as you said earlier on, but did you ever leave the Whitsundays, or did you?
Oh yeah. I moved back to Sydney to coach. I moved back to Sydney in 2000, so 5 years after I came up, I moved back, and there's a long story there. I met a girl, went to London, didn't work out, came back. That's a long story, quickly done. And so I moved back home to where I was comfortable, what I knew, and was coaching there until 2018 when I came back up here.
And is the plan now to move back, or are you staying there?
Oh, I wouldn't move back to Sydney, and I'm sorry about that, but I wouldn't move back to Sydney. I will move to somewhere southeast Queensland, somewhere. We're looking around at the moment.
You're talking to someone who's spending half their time, and in fact, as I'm talking to you now, I'm actually on the central coast of outside of Sydney, so I totally understand the need to get out of. Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
The summer, not so much, but the winter, glorious. So hard to miss it.
Talk to me about the coaching business.
Yeah.
And I love the concept of the rethinking, which is obviously something that's what you've had to do. But I guess both initially in the business when you took it over, and then again, obviously a few years ago when you had to come and rescue it.
Yes. When I came back 2018, we were in a hole deeper than I even had been. I'd sat in board meetings for 15 years and been told basically lies, which I'm sure happens in other businesses as well. And the story I was told is that, we'd lost a certain amount of money. The fact is we actually owed that amount of money at the time when I walked back in. And we were nowhere near meeting those obligations, but we worked our way around it. We struggled hard. We changed the marketing considerably.
Yep.
But really the whole concept of Rethink came out of this 5-day stay in the hospital. And what I realised was I'd made some very poor decisions. So during COVID, especially during that initial lockdown period, I spent every day studying the whole decision-making process and how and why people make decisions. Because I'd realised I'd made some horrible ones. And I'm sure any business owner who's been around doing it for a while is now sitting there going, yep, done that.
You bet.
So I actually sat down and wrote 50,000 words around decision-making, which I have now put into a book. It's been edited quite hard since then, so it's down to about 30,000 words. But it's called Don't Do Nothing, the book, and it'll be out soon, and I will send you a copy. But Don't Do Nothing is meant to be a practical guide for business owners in terms of them thinking about why they make decisions, how they make decisions, who influences the decisions they make, and then how they can make hopefully better decisions by working through a process that they may not have thought about in the past. We've all gone gut feel in the past. You've heard my stories. I've gone gut feel in the past, and that doesn't always work.
Nope.
So, I think the basis of my whole Rethink, I know the basis of my whole Rethink program starts with decision-making. And you know what? I've been around coaching an awful long time, and I've never asked the question I might have in a very superficial way, but no one's ever really challenged me about the decisions I've made. And as much as we like to influence business owners in the decisions they make, sometimes that comes from not always the best place as well. So we've tried to build a process. It's quite involved. I won't get into it now, but I think it's easy to understand, but sometimes it's hard for people to put that into play. And if you're not making good decisions, the rest of it's not going to work that well.
Yep, you're absolutely spot on. And I guess I know we've got to wrap things up in a moment, but I just wanted to ask you a question as well regarding all of that. How do, is there a realization that people need to have to come and work with you? Because I guess there are many business owners would be reasonably stubborn in not thinking, well, that's not really me. I don't really, yeah, I've made one or two bad decisions, but I don't really need someone to rethink my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point where you want people to go, actually, this is relevant to most business owners, or is there a kind of a niche, or what's that? Is there an aha moment that people need to have?
Look, I think there is I think the people that have already had the aha moment know it.
Yep.
It didn't take me long into those 5 days in the hospital bed to realize that, you know what, you've flown by the seat of your pants here. You really need to sit down and restructure the way you think about it. I mean, process is obviously done in many different aspects of business. You might say, oh, my accounting process is brilliant. I get all my invoices paid. That's wonderful. But, have you made all the other decisions to that point that makes that work? Well, I think there's a lesson in this for everybody. But obviously I can't talk to everybody. Well, there are ways you can, but we're really looking for business owners. When we start up in around August this year, we're going to look for business owners who've had some experience. I don't want the bloke that I was 30 years ago who's just starting, who's never really had much experience. I want people that have been in the trenches for 5 or 10 years, who've seen some of the up and downs of business, who've grown to a team of maybe 10 or 15 people, and really want to go to that next level, but some of the decisions they're making are stopping them getting there. That's the people I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, and we could talk for many hours about it. I guess I'm not ashamed to admit there are times when I think, even as a business owner, I think I'm getting in my own way with the decisions that you make.
Yeah. Or we just look at them too much. We read too much. And sometimes you just have to step back a bit and say, what was it I was trying to achieve? And will this decision help me get there?
And I think also what comes into it as well is sometimes you put trust in things, whether it's people or processes, and you haven't made the right decisions to to justify the trust in the first place.
Exactly.
And in this day and age, there's plenty of that going on out there as well. So
look, we're really looking forward to just getting out and having the conversations with people, seeing where it leads. But that's the starting point, and then we're working very hard on putting together what we call the Better Tomorrow plan, and we'll tell you more about that in another time.
Absolutely. Roy, thank you so much for being a great guest on BizBytes. And we're going to, as we always do, include in the show notes lots of links and things and information on how to get in contact with you. And I certainly hope that people do that. The business, I'm sure, is going to wind down nicely and fairly quickly for you on the Whitsundays. And looking forward to this new phase in your career as you start that up. And I'm sure there are people out there listening and going, I need to speak to this guy, because this is, if nothing else, it's a fascinating journey that you've had. And I'm sure you've got a lot of wisdom to impart along the way.
Thank you, Anthony, for your time. And we'll look forward to talking to anybody who's listened to this. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. And we look forward to having your company again on another edition of BizBytes. BizBytes is brought to you by ComTogether for all your marketing needs, so you can build your brand, engage audiences on multiple platforms. Go to comtogether.com.au, follow the links to book an appointment for a free consultation.